Hi there, my name is Maggie Burrows, and I am putting together some ideas to support you in your Feldenkrais practices. And it's a complex discussion to have um, because Feldenkrais is itself a little complex, which isn't the same as to say that it's difficult. Um, I am going to be I'm going to do these as a series of talks so that they don't come out too long. And I'm going to be basing them a little bit on something that Feldenkrais wrote many years ago that highlighted his ideas about learning to learn, the process of improving your capacity to learn. And one of the reasons that Feldenkrais can be a little hard to talk about, a little hard to describe, is because what we're focused on as a community, as teachers, is this learning to learn process. And of course, when you're teaching the process of learning to learn, you need to remain all the time in a mental state where you are still learning. And of course, that's actually, a fundamental element of teaching well. And I keep coming back to this word fundamental. I like it. I like its sense of roots, and I also like its sense of being about the bottom, the fundament. Um, so Feldenkrais Fundamentals is my particular version of a selection of strategies that are going to make both my courses, my recorded courses, easier to work with, the free things that are put up on YouTube easier to work with, and hopefully clarify your understanding of all of the Feldenkrais material you come across, so that you are always getting a little clearer and a little clearer and a little clearer about what it's capable of and what you're capable of, how much self-expansion you are able to handle. And it's got a lot of roots, it's got big roots, and I'm aware that I intend to keep this very practical. I have philosophical discussions, cases I want to make as well, discussions I'd like to have. But for these particular recordings, I'm going to try and attempt to stay reasonably close to the subject and not wander too far. And that's because I think you might come back to these recordings every so often and reassess whether you're getting the most out of your practice by having a second or a third visit with some of the ideas I hope to share. This article Feldenkrais wrote was called Learning How to Learn, and I actually already was very familiar with this concept um, uh, because I'd read a book written by Idries Shah on the subject of Sufism that was also called Learning How to Learn. So very quickly after I committed to doing the Feldenkrais training, I knew I was in my right environment. But I think one of the reasons that Feldenkrais can seem difficult to describe is because, what you're doing when you're in a space in a class is moving. And often when we talk about what we do as Feldenkrais practitioners, we talk about moving. And then when you're lying on a table having a hands-on session with a Feldenkrais practitioner, then you're being moved. And that's the most obvious element of it. There will be probably some conversation. In a class, there's often some discussion. Some teachers are a little warier of talking about the philosophical ideas than I am. I think the philosophical ideas behind Feldenkrais are not just fundamental to Feldenkrais, I think they're fundamental to living well. So my goal is that when people leave my classes, they have an understanding of just how far these concepts can take them once they start to make sense. There are several different phrases I could focus on, and my particular choice for the first phrase is not Feldenkrais. It comes from a man he had quite a few dealings with called Gregory Bateson, and he talked about a piece of information, a bit of information, as being a difference that makes a difference. So a difference that you don't notice, a difference that you don't register, is not making much difference to the way your brain is organised, the way your nervous system functions. But if you can make a difference that then actually makes a difference for you, so that you own it, so that you have incorporated it into your understanding and have access to it consciously, that would be a difference that's actually made a difference. And it's a neurobiological concept, it's a biophysical concept, it's relevant to computing, as you can tell by that little word bit there, but it's useful to remember that a huge amount of our own technology, it makes a good metaphor for what goes on in human beings, precisely and only because we design equipment inspired by our own capacities. So it's very useful to remember that the computer models us badly. We do not model the computer badly. So in a Feldenkrais movement experience, what's going on is that you're using one of the most accessible aspects of your inbuilt capacity to learn, how you do what you do, in order to expand the number of ways that you can do what you do, to give yourself more choices, and perceiving those differences, improving your ability to perceive what you're doing, how you're doing it, and expanding your understanding of the context in which you act, is all part of the Feldenkrais process. And I was going to say something else there and it slipped away, but hopefully it'll come back. I know what it was. So Feldenkrais, this is a story I heard. I haven't found it written down yet. A lot of what happened in my training and the other trainings, I was present at quite a few trainings. Teachers who spent a lot of time with him would tell stories about him, and I couldn't always then, re-access the source. So I can't remember who said this, and it perhaps is written down somewhere, but I haven't managed to find it yet, that Feldenkrais said if you can do something only one way, you're kind of like a robot, you've got no choice, you're like a machine. If you can do something two different ways, now you have a choice. Though there's a way in which you could also describe that as having a dilemma, this or this. It's not a lot of choice, just one or the other. We have a lot of binary experiences in our world, and they put us in this either or mode, when Feldenkrais is often about getting into a yes and what else, what can we add, what can we include in our integrated self. And that if you could do something, this is back to Feldenkrais again, that if you could do something 6 different ways, you're a genius. And he loved that word genius, and he used it a lot. He hung out with a lot of geniuses. He also liked the word idiot in a way that would not be appropriate to use as frequently as he used it nowadays. But the way he said, I love the lilt he puts into the word idiot when he says it. So talk of idiots and geniuses can, I think, trigger in our memory the idea that this stuff is somehow inborn. He was very, very clear that you could learn and expand your capacity out of almost any situation. And that's the thing that I think is most fundamental to Feldenkrais, is that wherever you are now, whatever you're dealing with, you're not stuck there unless you choose to be. You always have the option of learning more, incorporating more possibility, integrating more understanding and awareness, and expanding yourself. So these fundamentals that I'm gonna put in not a list, if I can avoid it. I don't think they come in any one order, and I think if you list things, it makes it sound like they do come in an order. So I'm going to see if I can present them as individual possibilities that relate and overlap sometimes. Feldenkrais produced a nice list of 11 things in his Learning to Learn essay. And some of those 11 things seem very similar to each other, and at least one of them is a fundamental explanation of how Feldenkrais works, rather than a discussion of a strategy of how it works for you as an individual doing the lesson. So there's my introduction. I will be back with more.